The alien warships appeared in space without warning. There were 17 of them, each one massive and dangerous. They moved together like hunting wolves, perfectly organized and ready for battle. Admiral Vexthor stood inside his command ship, looking at the human colony below. His 4 eyes glowed with excitement. This would be easy, he thought. The human settlement was called New Hope. It sat on a planet far from Earth with about 50,000 people living there. These people were farmers, miners, and families who wanted a quiet life. They had 2 small defense stations in space above them, but nothing that could stop a real attack. Vexthor's officer gave him the report. The colony had almost no protection. No military ships were nearby. It would take hours for any help to arrive. The admiral smiled, showing his sharp teeth. His people, the Krathians, had been conquering other races for 200 years. They were strong and feared. Humans were new to space, only exploring the stars for 70 years. They would be easy to defeat. The admiral gave his order. His ships opened fire. Bright plasma beams shot through space and hit the human defense stations. The stations exploded into pieces of metal and fire. The people on the planet below would be scared now, Vexthor knew. They always were. But something happened that Vexthor did not expect. Before the defense stations died, they sent out a signal. The signal traveled faster than light, reaching far into space. It found a human military ship called the Defiance, which was 2 light-years away on patrol duty. Captain Daniel Hayes was the commander of the Defiance. He was a serious man with gray in his hair and hard eyes. When he saw the message about the attack, his face became like stone. He asked his officer how long it would take to reach New Hope. 40 minutes, the officer said. Hayes nodded slowly. He ordered his crew to contact Earth's military command and tell them about the attack. Then he told them to prepare all weapons. Finally, he did something unusual. He told his communications officer to send a message to the Krathian ships. The message was simple and direct. It said the Krathians had made a terrible mistake. They had one chance to leave peacefully. If they refused, the humans were coming for them. When Vexthor heard this message, he laughed. One human ship threatening his entire fleet? The idea was ridiculous. He ordered his officers to ignore the message and continue landing troops on the planet. The Krathian soldiers went down to New Hope in their landing craft. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. The human security forces tried to fight back, but they were not trained soldiers. They were just ordinary people trying to protect their homes. The Krathians pushed forward, taking control of important buildings and areas. Then the Defiance arrived. Captain Hayes brought his ship out of hyperspace at full speed, moving faster than most ships dared to go. His weapons were already charged and ready. But Hayes was smart. He knew he could not win a direct fight against 17 enemy ships. So he did something different. Hayes ordered his crew to launch all their missiles, but not at the Krathian ships. Instead, the missiles flew toward the planet. They went into the upper atmosphere and exploded. These were special missiles that created a powerful electromagnetic pulse. This pulse was like a wave of energy that destroyed all unprotected electronics. On the ground, every piece of Krathian equipment stopped working. Their landing craft fell from the sky and crashed. Their communications went silent. Their power armor locked up, trapping the soldiers inside like prisoners in metal cages. The Krathian invasion force was completely helpless. Hayes smiled for the first time that day. Now he targeted the Krathian support ships in space. These were smaller vessels that carried supplies and troops. The Defiance attacked them with lasers and railguns, destroying 3 ships and badly damaging 2 more. The Krathians tried to fight back, but Hayes flew his ship in ways they had never seen before. He changed direction constantly, moving at speeds that should have crushed his crew. The Krathians could not understand how the humans survived such extreme forces. The truth was simple. Humans came from Earth, a planet with very strong gravity. Their bodies were tougher than most aliens. Their technology for dealing with high speeds was the best in the galaxy. What would kill other races only made humans uncomfortable. But Hayes knew he could not win alone. He was buying time, waiting for help. And help was coming. His sensor officer suddenly reported new ships arriving. It was the human Third Fleet. 23 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers and 1 battleship. Leading them was Admiral Richard Cole on his flagship, the Vengeance. Admiral Cole sent a message to the Krathian fleet. His voice was calm but firm. He told them they had attacked a human colony without reason. They had 30 seconds to power down their weapons and prepare to surrender. If they refused, they would be destroyed. There would be no second warning. Vexthor felt something he had never felt before. Fear. His fleet was damaged. His troops on the planet were helpless. Fresh human warships surrounded him, weapons ready. He had never retreated from a battle, but now he had no choice. He ordered his ships to prepare for an emergency jump into hyperspace. They would abandon the troops on the planet and escape. But Captain Hayes had expected this. He launched special missiles that exploded in a pattern around the Krathian fleet. These explosions created distortions in space that made hyperspace travel impossible. The Krathians were trapped. Vexthor stared at his tactical screens. The human fleet closed in from all sides. Their weapons were locked on target. The Admiral realized his terrible mistake. These humans did not fight like other races. They did not just defend themselves. They hunted their enemies like predators. Admiral Cole's voice came through the communications again. Time was up. Surrender or die. Those were the only choices. For the first time in his long military career, Vexthor gave the order to surrender. His voice was bitter with defeat. He transmitted his surrender to the human fleet and waited to become a prisoner. But even as he surrendered, Vexthor did not understand the full truth. The battle was over, but his nightmare was just beginning. The humans, he would learn, never forgot when someone attacked them. They never forgave acts of war against innocent people. And they never ever let their enemies escape justice. The Krathian Empire had started something it could not finish, and now it would face consequences that would change the galaxy forever. The Galactic Assembly was very old. It had existed for over 800 years. 237 different species belonged to it. They met every 3 months to talk about trade, borders, and occasional problems between species. But they had never seen anything like the human delegation that now stood before them. Ambassador Patricia Collins represented humanity. She was a small woman compared to most aliens in the room, but she carried herself with confidence. 2 human Marines in formal uniforms stood beside her. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke to the assembled delegates. She said that the United Earth government wanted to join the Galactic Assembly. Humans came not as beggars but as equals. They brought advanced technology, valuable resources, and a promise to cooperate peacefully with all species who shared these values. A tall alien with golden scales stood up. His name was Vorzen, and he was a Vexian. His species was one of the most powerful in the assembly. His words carried great weight. He said that while humanity had recently emerged in space, the assembly had concerns about human methods. Collins looked directly at him. She knew he was talking about what happened with the Krathians. Vorzen confirmed this. He said the human reaction was too extreme. A small border conflict had escalated into the effective control of an entire empire. Some delegates wondered if humans could be trusted with the responsibilities of membership. Collins smiled, but her eyes remained serious. She said there was nothing small about 17 warships attacking a civilian colony. 53 colonists died in that attack. 212 were wounded. The Krathians came to enslave or kill humans. The human response was measured and aimed at preventing future attacks. Whispers filled the chamber. Measured. The humans had brought an entire empire to its knees. Another alien spoke up. This one was made of living crystal and belonged to the Thalorian species. Many species had experience with the Krathians, the crystal being said. The Krathians were aggressive, yes, but they followed certain rules. They conquered but did not exterminate. They enslaved but did not torture. The human response looked like total war. This was concerning, Collins nodded. She understood their concern, but she wanted to be clear about humanity's position. Humans did not start conflicts. They preferred peaceful cooperation. However, when attacked, they would pursue justice with complete commitment. Not revenge, justice. Admiral Vexthor received a fair trial. He had legal help. He was found guilty of war crimes and was now serving a life sentence under humane conditions. Vorzen pressed the issue. What about the Empire itself? What about the human monitoring stations throughout Krathian space? What about human control of their border systems? Collins replied calmly. These were security measures. The Krathians kept their independence, their government, and their way of life. They simply no longer had the ability to attack their neighbors. If anything, humans made the region safer for everyone. Before Vorzen could respond, a new voice spoke from the back of the room. A Corellian ambassador stepped forward. The Corellians were a peaceful species whose worlds were near Krathian space. They had suffered from Krathian raids for decades but could not defend themselves. The Corellians spoke to all the delegates. For 40 years, the Krathians had raided their colonies. They took Corellians as slaves. They stole resources. The Corellians appealed to the Assembly for help many times. Each time they were told that intervention was not appropriate. They should seek diplomatic solutions. The Corellian paused, letting his words sink in. The humans stopped the Krathians in 6 months. For the first time in his lifetime, the Corellian border was secure. Their people no longer lived in fear. Whatever concerns existed about human methods, they achieved what the Assembly never could. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. The Corellian had spoken a difficult truth. The Assembly preferred stability over justice. They allowed predatory species to continue their behavior because stopping them was too difficult or expensive. Collins stepped forward and spoke directly. She wanted to make something absolutely clear. Humanity did not want to be the galaxy's police force. They did not want to build an empire. What they wanted was simple. If anyone attacked them or their allies, there would be real consequences. Not strongly worded statements. Not trade sanctions that accomplished nothing. Real consequences. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Every species here had a choice. Work with humans in good faith and they would find the most reliable ally possible. Humans would share technology, open trade routes, and defend common interests. But attack human people and you would learn what the Krathians learned. Humans did not forget. They did not stop until justice was served. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Collins had just delivered a threat wrapped in diplomatic language, and everyone understood it. The humans were not asking permission to join the galactic community. They were announcing their presence and stating their terms. The vote on human membership was scheduled for 1 month later. In that time, every species in the Assembly faced a decision. Accept humanity as an equal partner, or risk becoming their next example of justice. After the session, Vorzan approached Collins privately. His voice was quiet, almost secretive. He said that was quite a performance. Collins met his eyes and told him it was not a performance. It was a promise. Vorzan asked what would happen if the Assembly voted against human membership. Collins explained that humans would continue doing what they had been doing. Protecting their interests, helping their allies, making it very clear that attacking humanity was a losing choice. Membership would make things easier for everyone, but it was not necessary. Vorzan studied her for a long moment. He told her that many species saw humans as dangerous, unpredictable, too aggressive for the established order. Collins acknowledged this might be true, but she asked him to consider something. Humanity could have destroyed the Krathian fleet completely. They could have bombed Krathian worlds. They could have turned the entire empire into ruins. They chose not to. They chose restraint and justice over revenge. That should tell him something about human character. The Vexian delegate said nothing for a moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps it did tell him something. He would speak with his government. They might be more open to human membership than he initially indicated. As Collins left the assembly building, she contacted Admiral Cole through a secure channel. He asked how it went. She said it went as expected. The delegates were scared of humans, but they were also starting to respect them. The vote would be close, but she thought humans would get membership. Cole asked what would happen if they did not get membership. Collins smiled and explained they would build their own coalition. The Corellians would join. Probably a dozen other species that had been victimized by stronger powers would join too. They would create an alternative to the Assembly, one with actual power. Cole asked if she really thought they could reshape galactic politics that quickly. Collins reminded him that 6 months ago the Krathians thought they could attack humans without consequence. Now they were a human protectorate. The galaxy was learning that old rules did not apply to humanity. Humans were not like other species. They did not accept things just because they had always been that way. 1 month later, the Galactic Assembly voted to accept humanity as a full member. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 142 voted yes. 95 voted no. More importantly, it marked a turning point in galactic history. The humans had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy now had a new power, and that power played by different rules. Rules that emphasized action over words, justice over convenience, and consequences over diplomatic immunity. 6 months passed after the battle at New Hope. The Krathian Empire thought the incident was over. They had lost the battle, but wars end and life goes on. That was how things usually worked in the galaxy, but the humans were different. A diplomatic ship arrived at the Krathian homeworld. It carried an official document from the United Earth government. Chancellor Thexkor, the leader of the Krathian Empire, read the document in front of his council. His hands shook as he read the words aloud. The humans demanded the immediate surrender of Admiral Vexthor and all officers who participated in the attack. They wanted 500 billion credits as payment for damages. They demanded 3 border star systems to create a safety zone, and they wanted the right to place military monitoring stations throughout Krathian space. The humans gave the Krathians 30 days to agree. The council room exploded with angry voices. Councillor Vrendas stood up, his face showing rage. How dare these humans make such demands? The Krathian Empire had ruled their region of space for 200 years. They were powerful and respected. These young humans had no right to demand anything. But Chancellor Thexkor was worried. Something about the human message bothered him. It was too calm, too precise. The humans had spent 6 months preparing this response. They were not acting out of anger. They had a plan. Admiral Vexthor, who was present under guard, tried to warn them. He told the council they did not understand what they were dealing with. The humans fought differently than other races. They never gave up. They never forgot. But Councillor Vrendas dismissed his words. Vexthor had lost the battle because he was incompetent, Vrendas said. His fear meant nothing. Chancellor Thexkor made his decision. He told his people to send a reply rejecting all human demands. Admiral Vexthor had followed standard military procedures. The Empire would not surrender its officers to alien justice. They would not give up territory or accept monitoring stations. The message was sent. 27 days later, 3 days before the deadline, Captain Daniel Hayes commanded a fleet of 18 human warships. They waited in deep space far from any Krathian outpost. Hayes had been promoted for his actions at New Hope. Now he led a task force with a new mission. His tactical officer gave him the status report. All ships were ready. Spy drones were in position throughout Krathian space. They knew where 23 military bases were located, including the main naval base at the Krathian homeworld. Hayes gave the order to begin Operation Persistent Justice. The humans did not try to fight the entire Krathian fleet at once. That would be stupid. Instead, they attacked the Empire's support systems. Sensor stations went dark. Communication relays exploded. Supply depots were destroyed. Shipyards found their equipment mysteriously broken. The attacks were precise and carefully planned. The Krathians tried to respond, but they could never catch the human raiders. The human ships would attack and then vanish into hyperspace before help could arrive. They used tricks the Krathians had never seen. They hid in asteroid fields. They flew through the atmospheres of gas giant planets. They used gravity from planets to increase their speed. The humans were like ghosts. After 2 weeks, Chancellor Thexkor called an emergency meeting. He looked tired and worried. His normally calm voice held a note of desperation. They had lost 18 military installations and 32 civilian targets. Over 2,000 personnel were dead. Their border security was in ruins. 3 colony worlds were demanding more protection that the Empire could not provide, and they had not destroyed a single human ship. Councillor Vrendas, looking much less confident than before, suggested deploying the main fleet. 300 warships would end this problem. They could not hide from that many ships. But Vexthor, speaking from his prison cell through a hologram, warned them again. That was exactly what the humans wanted. They were trying to draw the fleet into a battle where the humans controlled the situation. The council ignored his advice. They ordered the entire Krathian battle fleet to hunt down the human raiders. 240 warships jumped to the location of the latest human attack. They found nothing but empty space and the wreckage of a destroyed supply depot. While the fleet searched uselessly, Captain Hayes watched from far away, hidden behind a dead moon. His tactical officer confirmed what Hayes already knew. The entire Krathian fleet was out of position. That meant the Krathian homeworld was undefended. Hayes smiled coldly and sent orders to Admiral Cole. It was time to execute the main plan. While the Krathian fleet searched for ghosts, 60 human warships appeared around the Krathian homeworld. Admiral Cole's voice echoed across every communication channel on the planet. He spoke directly to Chancellor Thexkor. The Krathian fleet was far away. The planetary defenses were weak. The humans gave them 10 minutes to surrender, or they would begin bombing military targets. Cole explained that they knew the location of every military installation on the planet. They knew where the leadership bunkers were. They had studied Krathian infrastructure for 6 months. They could destroy the Empire's ability to make war without killing a single civilian. But if the Krathians forced them to attack, the humans would be thorough. In the council chamber, Thexkor stared at the tactical display. The human fleet was in perfect position. His military advisors told him it would take hours to recall the main fleet. The system defense forces, only 30 ships, were scrambling but stood no chance. Councillor Vrendas looked at him with desperate eyes and said they must resist. But Thexkor understood the truth. If they surrendered, they would lose their pride and some territory. If they fought, they would lose everything. The humans had proven they could destroy the Empire whenever they wanted. This was mercy. The humans were giving them a choice. Thexkor ordered his communications officer to transmit their unconditional surrender. And so the Krathian Empire, which had dominated its region of space for 2 centuries, submitted to the demands of a species barely 100 years old. Admiral Vexthor was taken to human custody to face trial. The Empire paid the massive reparations. They gave up 3 border systems. Human observers moved into Krathian space, watching everything. The humans treated their prisoners well. Vexthor received a fair trial according to human military law. He had legal representation and could defend himself. He was found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to life in prison, but his conditions were humane. The humans did not torture or abuse him. The Krathian Empire continued to exist. The humans did not destroy their government or enslave their people. They simply removed the Empire's ability to threaten others. The Krathians could still trade, still prosper, still live their lives. They just could not attack their neighbors anymore. News of what happened spread throughout the galaxy. Every species heard the story of how the mighty Krathian Empire had been brought to its knees in just 6 months. The message was clear and impossible to ignore. Attacking humanity came with a price. And humans always collected what was owed. They never forgot an attack on their people. They never stopped until justice was served. And they never let their enemies escape the consequences of their actions. The galaxy was learning a new truth. Humanity was not just another species. They were something different, something dangerous, something that would change everything. 5 years passed after humanity joined the Galactic Assembly. A new crisis appeared in the outer rim of the galaxy. A militant religious group called the Zathric Collective had been expanding aggressively into neutral space. They claimed their god commanded them to spread their faith by force if necessary. Their latest target was Helios 7, a peaceful mining colony owned jointly by humans and Corellians. The Zathric demands were simple and brutal. Convert to their religion, submit to their authority, or face complete destruction. They gave the colonists 1 week to decide. Commander Gregory Stone stood in the operations center of the mining colony. He was reviewing the tactical situation with colony director Lauren Martinez. The news was not good. The Zathrics had 42 warships orbiting their nearest stronghold. The colony's security forces consisted of only 3 patrol ships. There was no way to fight them successfully. Stone studied the holographic display showing enemy positions. He told Martinez they did not need to fight. They just needed to hold until help arrived. He had already sent a distress call to Earth Space Command. Martinez asked how long that would take. Stone replied that the nearest fleet was 6 days away at maximum speed. Martinez looked dismayed. They had 1 week total. 6 days to arrive meant cutting it very close. Stone said they would evacuate civilians and prepare to defend the infrastructure. If they had to abandon the colony temporarily, they would. But they were not surrendering to religious fanatics. The evacuation began immediately. Civilian transport ships started moving colonists to the nearest safe system. But the mining operation represented billions of credits in investment and employed over 10,000 people. Abandoning it would be a massive economic loss. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Assembly, Ambassador Collins was making humanity's position clear. She stood before an emergency session called to address the Zathric situation. Her voice carried absolute certainty. The Zathric Collective had issued a threat to a civilian colony under human and Corellian protection. This was an act of aggression against 2 member species. The Assembly must intervene immediately. Delegate Vorzan, now one of humanity's strongest allies, supported the call. The Zathric expansion threatened multiple neutral systems. If the Assembly did not act now, the Zathrics would see inaction as permission to continue. But another delegate objected. The Nixarians were an extremely pacifist species. Their delegate suggested seeking a diplomatic solution, perhaps if the colony allowed Zathric missionaries to preach their faith peacefully. Collins cut him off sharply. With respect, she said, the Zathrics did not want missionaries. They wanted complete submission. Their religion included enslaving non-believers and executing those who refused conversion. This was not about religious freedom. This was about conquest. The debate continued for hours. Various species advocated different approaches. Some wanted economic sanctions. Others suggested mediation. A few proposed forming a joint assembly peacekeeping force, though everyone knew that would take months to organize. Finally, Collins had enough. She stood and addressed the chamber with barely hidden frustration. While they debated, civilians were being evacuated from their homes. Workers were abandoning years of labor. The Zathric fleet was preparing to attack. The assembly could choose to act, or it could watch while humanity acted alone. But either way, the Zathrics would learn the same lesson the Krathians learned. She paused dramatically. She was giving the assembly 24 hours to pass a resolution authorizing intervention. If they could not make that decision in that time, humanity would proceed independently. And she promised that the consequences would be severe enough that no one would question human resolve again. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates accused humanity of threatening the assembly itself. Others praised Collins for forcing action on a crisis the assembly would normally ignore. The session ended without a resolution, but with a promise to meet again the next day. On the 6th day after the Zathric ultimatum, their fleet arrived at Helios 7 exactly on schedule. 42 warships appeared in space in perfect formation, weapons charged and ready. The colony's 3 patrol ships had withdrawn to defensive positions around the remaining infrastructure. High Cleric Zarthul commanded the Zathric fleet. His voice was filled with religious passion and absolute certainty as he opened a communication channel to the colony. He told the inhabitants their time had expired. They had rejected divine truth. They had refused to submit to the righteous path. Therefore, according to holy law, he would purify the system with cleansing fire. Perhaps their souls would find redemption in the next life. Commander Stone responded from the command center. He stated they were a civilian mining operation with no military value. Attacking them would be a war crime under Galactic Assembly law. But Zarthul declared that assembly laws were meaningless before divine will. He told them to prepare for judgment. The Zathric ships began moving into attack formation. Stone asked his tactical officer about their reinforcements. The Earth fleet was still 2 hours away. They could not hold that long. Stone was about to order evacuation of all remaining personnel when something impossible happened. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of them. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around the system. Stone demanded identification. His tactical officer stared at the display in disbelief. He reported human ships, Corellian ships, Vexian ships, and Thalorian ships. It was a joint fleet. At least 80 vessels total. A communication came through. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the main screen. But he was not alone. Beside him stood Admiral Vorzan of the Vexian fleet and Commander Thel of the Corellian Defense Force. Cole spoke calmly to the Zathric leader. This was Admiral Richard Cole commanding the Joint Assembly Intervention Force. Zarthul was violating multiple assembly laws, including attempted genocide, illegal territorial expansion, and threatening civilian populations. He had one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. If he refused, they would disable his ships and arrest him for war crimes. On the Zathric flagship, Zarthul stared at his tactical display. The massive fleet now surrounded his forces. His religious certainty wavered for the first time. The divine will had promised him victory, but it had not prepared him for this. He tried to maintain his confidence. The faithful could not be stopped, he declared. Their cause was righteous. Admiral Vorzan spoke for the first time. He said the Zathric cause was irrelevant. The assembly had authorized the use of force to protect its members. Zarthul could surrender and face justice or fight and be destroyed. Those were his only options. Zarthul asked his tactical officer if they could fight their way out. The officer replied negatively. The joint fleet outnumbered them 2-1 and their ships were better equipped. If they fought, they would be destroyed completely. For a long moment, Zarthul said nothing. Then slowly he gave the order to power down weapons and transmit their surrender. The Zathric fleet stood down. Within hours, Zarthul and his senior officers were in custody. Their ships were being escorted to an assembly detention facility. The crisis was over without a single shot being fired. In the assembly chamber, Ambassador Collins addressed the gathered delegates. The resolution to intervene had passed just hours before the joint fleet arrived. It had been pushed through by a coalition of species who finally agreed that inaction was no longer acceptable. Collins told them that today, the assembly proved it could act decisively to protect its members. The Zathric threat had been neutralized without bloodshed. This was what cooperation looked like. This was what strength looked like when backed by unity and purpose. She paused and looked around the chamber. Humanity did not do this alone. They had help from species who understood that aggression must be met with strength, not just words. Together they sent a message to every would-be conqueror in the galaxy. The days of preying on the weak were over. Delegate Vorzan stood and added his voice. Collins was correct. For too long, the assembly preferred comfortable inaction over difficult but necessary intervention. The humans taught them that delayed justice was denied justice. Today, they finally applied that lesson. The chamber erupted in applause from some delegates, though others sat in uncomfortable silence. The message was clear. The galaxy had changed. The old order of passive diplomacy and endless debate was giving way to something new. Something that the Krathians and Zathrics had learned the hard way. When you threaten humanity or their allies, you do not escape. You face justice, and increasingly that justice was backed not just by human warships, but by a coalition of species who finally found the courage to stand together. 10 years passed after the Krathian incident. The Galactic Assembly had transformed into something its founders would barely recognize. The joint intervention force that stopped the Zathrics had evolved into a permanent peacekeeping fleet. 47 member species contributed ships and personnel. Humanity provided many of the ships and most of the tactical training, but it was no longer just a human operation. It was truly galactic. In a neutral space station orbiting the Assembly headquarters world, a special meeting was taking place. 3 individuals who played key roles in transforming galactic politics were present. Retired Admiral Richard Cole now served as humanity's military advisor to the Assembly. Delegate Vorzan had become one of the Assembly's most influential voices. Former Chancellor Thexkor of the Krathian Empire was invited to share his perspective on human methods. The meeting was being recorded for historical archives, but it also served as an educational document for species new to the galactic community. The topic was simple but important: understanding humanity's approach to conflict. Vorzan opened the discussion. He asked Chancellor Thexkor to speak. Thexkor had the unique perspective of someone who faced humanity in conflict and survived to build a peaceful relationship. What would he say to a species considering hostile action against human interests? Thexkor was now elderly and bore scars from his time in power. He spoke slowly but clearly. He would tell them simply, "Do not attack humans. Whatever you think you can gain through aggression, it is not worth the cost." Vorzan asked him to explain further. Thexkor's voice took on a bitter edge as he spoke. The Krathian Empire had dominated their region of space for 2 centuries. They conquered 12 species. They subjugated populations totaling over 80 billion people. They believed themselves invincible. It took humans only 6 months to bring them to their knees, not through superior numbers or overwhelming force, but through relentless, methodical pursuit of justice. Cole spoke up. He said Thexkor made it sound like humans were vindictive. That was not their intention. Thexkor agreed. That was exactly what made humans so dangerous. They were not vindictive. They followed their laws, gave due process, and applied proportional responses. But they never stopped. They never forgot. They never let political convenience override their principles. That consistency was terrifying to species used to the old ways. Vorzan leaned forward and asked what Thexkor meant by the old ways. The former chancellor explained. In the old assembly, before humanity arrived, conflicts were resolved through negotiation and compromise. An aggressor might pay money or give up some territory, but they were never truly held accountable. There was always an escape option, some way to minimize consequences. Humans did not offer escape options. Attack them, and they would pursue you until justice was served. Not revenge, justice, but they were absolutely committed to it. Cole nodded in agreement. Humans learned that approach from their own history. For too long, Aggressive nations on Earth got away with their actions because stopping them seemed too expensive or difficult. Eventually, humans developed the concept of persistent accountability. If you commit a crime, especially against humanity, they will pursue you until you face trial. Even if it takes years, even if it costs money, even if it is politically inconvenient. Vorzan observed that this principle extended to galactic politics. Cole confirmed this. When the Krathians attacked New Hope, they probably expected the usual response. Some harsh words, maybe economic penalties, possibly a brief fight before both sides agreed to negotiate. Instead, they got Operation Persistent Justice. Humans made an example of them. But more importantly, they proved humanity would not accept the old rules. Thexkor added his perspective. That example changed everything. Other species saw what happened to the Krathians and reassessed their own policies. The Zathrix tried to test human resolve 5 years later and met a coalition fleet. Pirates attempted to raid human shipping lanes and found themselves hunted across 3 sectors. Every time, the response was the same. Swift, measured, but absolutely relentless. Vorzan addressed the recording device directly. For species watching this, they should understand what the Chancellor was saying. Humans introduced a new idea to galactic politics. They call it deterrence through certainty. The certainty that aggression will be met with proportional but inevitable consequences. Cole added more. It was more than just consequences. Humans also proved that justice and mercy were not opposites. Look at the Krathian Empire today. They were independent, prosperous, and peaceful. Humans did not destroy them. They did not enslave them. They just ensured the Krathians could not threaten others anymore. Admiral Vexthor was serving his sentence under humane conditions and would be eligible for parole in 15 years. That was not cruelty. That was civilized justice, Thexkor agreed strongly. The humans gave the Krathians something they never gave their own conquered peoples. Dignity. They defeated the Empire utterly but treated them with respect throughout the process. That was why today the Krathian Empire was one of humanity's strongest allies. They learned that the human way worked better than conquest. The conversation continued for another hour, covering various aspects of human military doctrine, diplomatic philosophy, and cultural values. But the core message remained constant. Attacking humanity or their allies came with a price that no aggressor could afford to pay. When the recording ended, Vorzan asked Cole a question. Did he think this recording would actually deter future aggression? Cole considered carefully. Honestly, some species would test them anyway. They would think they were different, smarter, or luckier than the Krathians or Zathrix. But each time humans responded consistently, the message got stronger. Eventually, even the most aggressive species would think twice. Thexkor stood to leave but paused at the door. He wanted to add something for the record. In 10 years of observation, he noticed something about humans that other species should understand. Humans did not just pursue justice for themselves. They pursued it for others too. Vorzan asked what he meant. Thexkor explained. The Corellians, the Thalorians, even his own people now. When someone threatened a human ally, humanity responded as if their own worlds were under attack. That solidarity was unprecedented in galactic history. Most species protected their own interests first and their allies second, if at all. Humans seemed to genuinely believe in collective security. Cole smiled. It was not entirely selfless. Humans learned that protecting their allies made everyone safer. An attack on a Corellian colony today could become an attack on a human colony tomorrow. Better to stop the aggressor early. Thexkor acknowledged this but added something important. He had seen how human crews interacted with allied personnel. There was genuine friendship, genuine respect. Humans did not just treat allies as strategic assets. They treated them as people worth protecting. After Thexkor left, Vorzan and Cole sat in comfortable silence. Finally, the Vexian asked if Cole ever worried they made the galaxy too dependent on human military power. Cole admitted he worried about this every day. That was why they were training joint forces and sharing tactical knowledge. The goal was not human dominance. It was creating a system where aggression simply was not profitable for anyone. Vorzan asked what would happen if someone developed new weapons or found a way to neutralize their advantages. Cole's expression became serious. Then they would adapt. That was what humans did best. They did not have the strongest bodies or longest lifespans. They did not have the best technology or most ships. What they had was the ability to change tactics, learn from every encounter, and never give up. Ever. That was the real warning to potential aggressors. He stood and walked to the viewport, looking at the assembled ships of the joint peacekeeping fleet. Human destroyers flew alongside Vexian cruisers. Corellian frigates coordinated with Thalorian support vessels. Even Krathian ships now served in the fleet, their crews reformed and retrained according to human military standards. Cole spoke quietly. The galaxy was learning that delayed justice was denied justice, learning that aggressive expansion was not worth the cost, learning that cooperation benefited everyone. But most importantly, they were learning that if you attack humanity or their allies, humans would never let you escape. Not through negotiation, not through political maneuvering, not through hiding or running. They would pursue justice with absolute commitment until it was served. Vorzen joined him at the viewport. He said that was a powerful deterrent. Cole agreed. It was meant to be powerful, but it was also completely true. Every word. The Krathians learned it. The Zathrix learned it, and every species thinking about testing humanity would learn it too, if they were foolish enough to try. The recording of their meeting was distributed throughout the galaxy. It was translated into 342 languages. It became required viewing at military academies across dozens of worlds. The recording was titled simply, The Human Warning. The message was clear. In the new galactic order, aggression had consequences. Real, inescapable consequences. Humans proved they would never forget an attack. They would never stop pursuing justice, and they would never let an aggressor escape accountability.